for me?
Jim Ruether.
Okay.
Last name spelling Reuther.
Great. If you could start by walking me through last night and then today's events, what you guys found when you got there.
Actually, it was this morning.
Okay.
Is what has happened.
Okay.
Fire department was dispatched this morning at 8:25 to check for carbon monoxide. Two firefighters arrived on scene and they started analyzing for carbon monoxide. They went just inside the door 10 to 20 feet and they picked up 379 parts per million. At that time they evacuated the building. When we first got the call, they were talking about 10 individuals that were sick, throwing up. And when I showed up over there, there was a lot more than 10. There was approximately about 30 individuals there. So we did that. Jamestown area ambulance was on scene with 2 rigs. Jamestown Police Department was there with 2. Ourselves, we had 2 rigs there. The ones that were more sick were loaded up in the ambulance, both of those. And then the rest of them were loaded into a fire truck, packed into a fire truck and a van. So, and then we transported behind. The ambulance had already taken off with the ones that were a little bit more sick, and then we transported the rest of them because we ended up having some more sick ones. At first they were feeling pretty good, but all of a sudden we were getting more sick ones as it went along.
Okay, when you say 379 parts per million, could you explain what that...
279 parts per million.
Could you explain what that means and then how dangerous that is?
Basically, at 50 parts per million, it's a maximum allowable concentration for continuous exposure in any 1 hour period. 200 parts per million, slight headache, tiredness, dizziness, nausea after 2 to 3 hours. 400 parts per million are frontal headaches within 1 to 2 hours, and life-threatening after 3 hours.
Any idea how long this had been going on by the time you got the call? I know they were sleeping there overnight.
When we got the call this morning, but just the conversations that I had heard this morning, that some of them were already feeling a little sick last night. So the retreat was supposed to start, well, it started yesterday, it was supposed to go through tonight yet, and then tomorrow. But, you know, one good thing out of this is that if it would have been much longer, we would have had a huge issue. I mean, it would have been much worse than what it was. I mean, it was bad the way it is now, but it would have been much worse, I would say, within less than a half an hour. Because there was one that I know for sure, but I think there was even more than that, but they went to check the bathroom downstairs and the bathroom was locked, so they thought that was an indication that there might be somebody inside of it. So the Jamestown ambulance and the firefighters who were there kicked open the door, and here somebody was laying inside there. So they assisted her out. I believe she was a female. I don't know that for sure, but and then there were some other ones that were really sick that went to the ambulance. And then we did another building search just to make sure everybody was accounted for, because when we got on scene, when we were first information we got that there was 10 sick, so we just took it as 10. But when I pulled up there, there was kids all over, so there was approximately 30. And then we didn't know that. We didn't have a number count, so we had to go back in and do a secondary search at the same time. So.
Is there a way to tell how long they were exposed to this, though?
I would not be able to do that. No.
Okay. In terms of the investigation from there after transporting the kids, are you involved in that at all? Where's that at now?
Basically, I had talked to some of the church members. One of them came down here, and I said that you needed to notify somebody right away to have the system looked at, or try to find the problem. And I got a phone call back that somebody was already there trying to locate the problem, what caused it. So.
Then do you know how they knew to call, please?
Actually, the pastor, she made the decision. When it comes to, flu symptoms are basically about the same thing as carbon monoxide poisoning. But when you get more than 2, and when you get 10, obviously there's a problem here. And I'm believing she indicated by that there must be some kind of problem here. So when we got dispatched, she said we needed to go down there and check for carbon monoxide. So when you have 10 of them that are throwing up and not feeling good, there's, it's a good indication that there's a good possibility that you have carbon monoxide.
Were there any that were in the building that seemed okay and seemed fine? Could you talk about that?
From my understanding, there were some that felt fine, and that would be more maybe towards Bill, that he might be able to answer that question. But from my understanding, there were some that were doing fine.
Was there any carbon monoxide detectors in the church at all, or?
None that we're aware of.
It's kind of a sign that maybe get some.
Well, and one of the lessons learned off of this is that we highly recommend people to put carbon monoxide detectors in. It doesn't matter where you're at. Any place where it's inhabited by people, there should be carbon monoxide detectors. You know, should be. But we don't force them, and we can't force them to do that. We just highly, highly recommend that you do that. And after what had happened today, it would be a good indicator that this would be the time to go get one. You know, people always think that this kind of stuff that can't happen to them. Well, it can happen.
Is that more prevalent during certain times of year in terms
The
of
heating
having,
season.
Could you talk about that also? Was anything about their heating system that you know of?
I don't know anything about their heating
No,
system.
okay.
If there were, I mean, obviously there's a problem of some type. Now, what it pertains to, I have no idea. But usually during the heating season, we go on a number of carbon monoxide calls. And I would say out of 95% of them, most of them have a very low amount. But any amount that we indicate or we detect, we advise them to let them know that you should have your heating appliances or whatever it may be checked out. And we also highly recommend them that they do annual inspections, have somebody in this qualified firm or individual to check these out on an annual basis. We go on carbon monoxide calls where people have run their vehicle in the garage, but the garage door was open. But if you get the right wind in the right direction, it blows it right into the house. So, but we highly recommend that they get carbon monoxide detectors and just do their annual services with their equipment, their heating equipment, or anything that is gas-fired or fuel-fired should be checked.
What were you thinking when you pulled up and saw, you know, all these sick kids, and not just two? It's obviously not just a flu type thing. What was going through your mind, I guess?
We had 2 firefighters there already on scene, and I was monitoring the radio traffic, and when they told me that there was over 300 parts per million, and I went down to the scene myself then. When I pulled up, and I thought, 10, there's a lot more here than 10. We've got a big deal going on here. I mean, it's bigger than we expected to see.
You just said you go on a lot of calls. How out of the ordinary is it for it to be this high and this many people affected?
I can remember somewhat one a few years ago that was about 400 parts per million, and it was a family, and they were also transported someplace.
Okay, is there anything that you want to add that maybe neither of us have thought to bring up yet?
No, I guess one of the biggest things I can add is that being there at the scene, all the agencies that were at the scene, coming to the hospital and seeing how everything just kind of came together. We tested our system today. We tested our resources today. I mean, it was all that. I mean, it was, unfortunately, it was a real event, but it was tested, and I think it went quite well from my understanding.
Okay. I'm a little confused because I think you just said over 300 parts per million again. Is it 279 or is it 379?
279.
It is 279.
It's 279, and that was the first reading inside the door, 10 to 20 feet in. They never did get a reading in the basement, and that's my understanding was where the problem may have laid.
Okay.
And I'm just speculating here, but I'll bet you it was probably close. If they couldn't get a reading in the basement, I would guess that it was close to 600 to 800 parts per million in the basement, if we had that much at the door right away.
What are the symptoms of that? Do you have that on your chart?
The symptoms of that?
Yeah, something that high.
800 is dizziness, nausea, convulsions within 45 minutes, unconscious within 2 hours, death within 2 to 3 hours. And some of the symptoms I've seen, I don't think we were too far from, like I said, something bad happening. Much worse happening, I should say.
You talk about how they were sick. How did some of these students look, I guess?
Pale. They'd walk around, and all of a sudden, they were just, I seen a couple of them that were kind of stumbling. In the back of the fire truck, we loaded a bunch in back there, and I had one that was passing out, so that's when we took off. As soon as we knew we had them all out, everybody was out of the building, then we started transporting, but as soon as we had that one passed out, or starting to pass out, then we automatically went right to the emergency room right away. Because some of them felt fine as they were outside. No, I feel good. Some of those that said that, after a while, you could see that they were sick from it. And from my understanding, and that might be something for Bill here too, but from my understanding, everybody was checked out that was brought in today.
Do you know how many people were at this retreat, or?
Approximately 30.
What about there were 2 adults there, how were they doing? Do you know, should I ask
That
about that?
That would have to be something that somebody else would have to answer. I can't answer that.
Okay. Are you good, or? Yeah, okay, should we switch?